The gun went off before she even had a chance to run. That was the detail nobody talked about afterward. Not the headlines, not the press release the company issued 3 days later, not even the detective who took her statement with the kind of bored efficiency that told her he'd already decided the story before she opened her mouth. They all started at the wrong place. They started with the boardroom. Nell started with the gun. She'd been working late again. That was her whole life at 31, working late, eating cold takeout at her desk, riding the last subway home with her shoes in her hand because her feet hurt too much to keep them on. She was a forensic accountant at Vauquelin Capital, which was a title that sounded more important than it was. In practice, it meant she found the money other people tried to hide. She was very good at it. She'd been good at it since she was 16, teaching herself double-entry bookkeeping from a library book because her mother's boyfriend kept borrowing from the rent envelope, and she needed to know exactly how much was missing before she could figure out how to replace it. That particular skill set had made her valuable at Vauquelin. It had not, as it turned out, made her safe. The offices were on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in Midtown that the building directory called the Hartwell Center. Nell called it the aquarium. Too much glass, too much light, always the feeling that something outside was watching. She'd mentioned that once to her supervisor, Derek Ashby, and he'd laughed in the particular way men laugh at women who say things that make them uncomfortable. "You're so dramatic, Nell." He said that a lot. It was 11:40 when she found the discrepancy. It took her another hour to understand what she was looking at. By 1 in the morning, her hands were shaking. $47 million. Not missing, moved. Carefully, methodically, through a network of shell companies, so intricate it looked like noise unless you knew where to look. And Nell knew where to look. She always knew where to look. She was still staring at her screen when the office door opened. She assumed it was the cleaning crew. It wasn't. The man who stepped through the door was not someone who belonged in a mid-level accounting firm at 1 in the morning. He was tall, the kind of tall that makes rooms feel smaller, and he was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Dark hair, silver at the temples. A scar that ran from his left cheekbone down toward his jaw, thin and white, old enough that whoever had put it there was probably long past caring. He looked at her the way she imagined a surgeon looked at a chest cavity, with precise clinical interest and without any particular emotion. He was not alone. There were 2 men behind him, both in black, both built like filing cabinets. One of them had his hand near his hip. Nell thought, "I am going to die in this office and nobody will find me until Monday." "Mrs. Carver," the man said. His voice was lower than she expected, unhurried, like he had never once in his adult life felt the need to rush. Close the spreadsheet. She didn't move. Later, she would not be able to explain why. Some part of her brain had apparently decided that if she didn't move, this was still the kind of problem she could solve with math. "I'm not going to ask twice," he said, and somehow that was quieter than the first sentence. She closed the spreadsheet. He walked into the room like he owned it, not with arrogance, she thought, but with the deeper, stranger confidence of someone who owned enough things that one more didn't particularly register. He pulled a chair out from the conference table, turned it around and sat on it backward, arms folded across the top looking at her, not at her screen, at her. "How much did you find?" he asked. She said nothing. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. "You found all of it," he said. "I can tell. You have the look." "What look?" "The look people get when they realize the problem is larger than they thought." He tilted his head slightly. "Most people get scared. You just got angry." She had been angry. She was still angry, actually, under the fear. $47 million moved through accounts she'd been auditing for 3 years without anyone flagging it, which meant either everyone around her was incompetent, or she was the only person in this building who hadn't been told about it. Neither option was good. "Who are you?" she asked. "My name is Voss," he said, which told her almost nothing. "She filed it anyway, and you're here because you found something that took my people 8 months to find." He glanced at her monitor, then back at her. "How long did it take you?" She didn't want to answer. She answered anyway. 3 hours. The almost smile again. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were doing something else entirely, calculating, she thought, adding up columns in his head the same way she did. I need someone who can read money the way you just read that file, he said. I have a problem. My problem requires your specific skill set. I have a job. You had a job, he said. Derek Ashby called the police an hour ago. He told them you were embezzling. The floor dropped out from under her. She heard herself say, very carefully, I'm sorry, the 47 million. He's attributed it to you. There's a paper trail, fabricated, but clean enough to hold under preliminary examination. You'll be arrested when you try to leave the building. He paused. The police are downstairs now. The room felt like it was breathing wrong. She thought about her mother, who was still paying off medical debt, and didn't need a phone call about her daughter being arrested. She thought about the library book on double-entry bookkeeping. She thought about all the years of working late and eating cold food and being careful, being so careful and still ending up here. You're lying, she said, because she needed to say something. Call the lobby, he said. Ask the night security guard if there are officers in the building. His name is Ray. He'll tell you. She looked at him. He looked back. He had the stillness of a man who was never wrong about things like this and knew it. She didn't call the lobby. What do you want? She asked. He reached into his jacket. She tensed and placed a folder on the table between them. Plain manila, nothing on the cover. She didn't open it. I want you to work for me, he said. 6 months. You'll audit 3 sets of books, mine and 2 others I'll designate. You'll tell me exactly what you find, all of it. You don't lie to me, you don't omit, you don't get creative with what you report. He tapped the folder once. In exchange, the evidence against you disappears. The paper trail gets unwound. Ashby stops being a problem. What does that mean? Stops being a problem. It means he stops being a problem. She looked at him for a long time. He let her look. Outside, 42 floors down, the city was still running. Taxis and delivery trucks and people who had no idea this room existed. And if I say no, she asked. Then I leave, he said, and you handle the next 30 years on your own. The folder sat on the table. She thought about what was inside it. She thought about what she'd seen on her screen tonight. $47 million in motion, going somewhere deliberate and specific, which meant someone at the top of this company was connected to something that was not a company at all. She thought about Voss sitting backward on a conference chair at 1 a.m, waiting, patient as geology. She thought, I am so tired. She opened the folder. His car was armored. She noticed that before she noticed anything else. The weight of the door when she pulled it shut, that slight elevation off the ground, the way ambient noise from the street cut off so completely it was like being underwater. One of the men in black got in the front. The other stayed outside. Voss sat beside her with 6 inches of space between them and did not speak. She said, Where are we going? Somewhere you can sleep, he said. We'll start in the morning. I need to get my things from my apartment. Someone will collect them. I'm not comfortable with Carver. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. You are not in a position to be comfortable. That position is available to you in 6 months if you do your job, he looked out the window. Tonight, we drive. She sat back. She looked at her hands. They had stopped shaking, which surprised her. She'd expected them to keep shaking for much longer. But something about Voss's absolute unruffledness had leveled her out, the way cold water levels out a fever. He was so certain of everything that it was almost restful. She hated that it was restful. The money I found tonight, she said. It was going to Colfax Holdings. A pause. Brief. She almost missed it. I know where it was going, he said. Colfax is a holding company for, I know what Colfax is. Then you know whoever was moving that money is going to notice it's been stopped. They're going to notice tonight, or tomorrow at the latest, and they're going to know someone found it. She turned to look at him, and then they're going to want to know who. He looked at her for the first time since they'd gotten in the car. In the passing light from the street lamps, the scar on his jaw was more visible, a clean line, surgical in its precision. She wondered if that was the person who'd made it or the person who'd fixed it. Yes, he said. So I'm already in it. "You were in it 3 hours ago," he said, "when you opened that file." She turned back to the window. The city scrolled past, bodegas and restaurants, and a woman walking a very small dog and a man asleep in a doorway with a paper cup beside him, all of them entirely unaware. She thought, this is how it happens. This is how ordinary people end up in extraordinary trouble, not because they went looking for it, because they were good at their jobs. "Voss," she said. "Yes, if I find something in your books that you don't want me to find, then you tell me," he said. "That's the arrangement. And I don't kill accountants," he said. "It's bad business. They're hard to replace." Another pause. "Especially the ones who can read a shell company in 3 hours." She didn't say anything. "Get some sleep," he said. "You'll need to be sharp tomorrow." She closed her eyes, not because she expected to sleep, but because she needed to stop looking at him. He was the kind of person who was difficult to look at for too long. Not because he was frightening, exactly, but because he gave nothing away, and her brain kept trying to read the page and finding it blank, and that blankness was its own kind of vertigo. She did not sleep. The apartment, his apartment, or one of them, she suspected, was in a building with no number on the door and a lobby staffed by a man who looked like he'd seen everything and felt no way about any of it. The apartment itself was on the 14th floor and was the kind of space that said money, not because it was decorated expensively, but because it was barely decorated at all. Clean lines, dark furniture, a kitchen that had clearly never been used for cooking, a window that looked out over the river and the river looked back. Someone had already put a bag on the bed in the guest room. Her bag, her clothes, her toiletries, her laptop. She didn't ask how. A woman named Rourke. She introduced herself only by last name, which Nell thought was probably deliberate, brought her a key card, and told her breakfast would be available at 7. Rourke was somewhere in her 40s, had the posture of someone who'd been military, and decided not to leave it behind, and looked at Nell the way people look at furniture, assessing its function. "The study is off-limits," Rourke said. "The 3rd bedroom is off-limits. Everything else you can access. When do I meet with Voss?" "When he's ready." "Does that have a time attached to it?" Rourke looked at her. "Mr. Voss doesn't attach times to things," she said. She left. Nell stood in the guest room for a long time after that, looking at her bag on the bed. Someone had packed her emergency Tylenol. That was what got her. The emergency Tylenol, which lived in the bottom of her nightstand drawer under 3 years of accumulated lip balm and rubber bands, and which she had never once mentioned to anyone. They'd known it was there. They'd looked. She sat on the edge of the bed and breathed through her nose and did not cry, because she had made a decision at some point. She couldn't remember exactly when. That crying was a thing she would do later, when she had the time. She opened her laptop and tried to remember what normal felt like. His books were impeccable. That was the first thing that surprised her. She'd expected hidden money, sloppy edges, the kind of organized chaos that powerful men used to intimidate the people who checked their numbers. Instead, Voss's financial records were the cleanest she'd ever seen. Every transaction sourced, every account reconciled, the kind of books that looked like someone cared very much about the truth of them, even when the truth was, as it occasionally was, about things that were not strictly legal. She flagged those. He'd said to flag everything. On the 3rd day, she found the secondary set. Not his, or not his in the same way, a separate entity running parallel to his primary holdings, using similar architecture but with one key difference. 3 accounts that terminated in a name she'd seen before, Colfax Holdings, the same endpoint as the money at Vauclair. She sat very still for approximately 4 minutes. Then she printed the relevant pages, an instinct, old and unglamorous, and folded them into the inside pocket of her blazer, and went to find Voss. He was in the study, which she was technically not supposed to enter. She knocked anyway. "Come in," he said, which surprised her. It was a large room, mostly bookshelves, with a desk in the center that was covered in maps, actual physical maps, which struck her as both anachronistic and somehow correct. He was on the phone, but he ended the call when she walked in. He looked at her and waited. "Colfax is connected to you," she said. He said nothing. "Not through your primary holdings, through a secondary structure. Kelmore Partners, registered in Delaware. She watched his face. But you already know that. Yes, he said. Then what am I actually here to find? He stood up from the desk. He was very still when he moved. Economical, she thought, like someone who'd spent years in small spaces. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her, looking at the city. Kelmore was my partners, he said. Halverson. We ran the syndicate together for 11 years. 14 months ago, he started moving money I didn't authorize, into Colfax and through Colfax into 3 other structures I haven't been able to identify. He turned. I need to know where it ends. You can't find it yourself. My people are good at many things, he said. They are not good at this. He looked at her. You found the Vauclain discrepancy in 3 hours. You found Kelmore in 3 days. You have a gift for understanding money's grammar, the logic underneath the logic. A pause. I need to know if Halverson is stealing from me or building something. What's the difference? Stealing ends when I stop him, he said. Building. He stopped, looked at her. Building means there's something I don't know yet. And in my business, not knowing things gets people killed. She thought about the gun that had gone off the night she found the discrepancy. She hadn't mentioned it to him. She thought she should. Someone shot at me, she said. 3 nights ago when I was leaving Vauclain, I thought it was random. I didn't. She stopped. I thought it was random. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. A recalibration. You didn't think to mention this, he said. I thought it was random, she said again. It wasn't random, he said. No, she said. I'm starting to understand that. He picked up his phone and spoke into it briefly. She caught the word perimeter and the word escalate. He ended the call and looked at her across the room. You're not leaving this building until I understand the scope of what Halverson is doing, he said. It's not a request. His voice was level, not angry, just certain. I brought you into this and you're in it now completely. That means I'm responsible for you. Something crossed his face that she couldn't name. I don't take that lightly. She looked at him. He was standing in his study with maps spread out behind him, and he looked. Not like the man who'd walked into her office and overturned her life, but like someone who was very tired of overturning things and had simply never figured out how to stop. She said, You've been trying to find Halverson's trail for 14 months. Yes, you haven't been able to. No, because he built it to look like you built it, she said. Same architecture, same logic, same obfuscation patterns. Whoever taught him how to hide money, he learned from the same place you did. She watched him. Or he learned from you. The silence was different now. Halverson didn't learn from me, Voss said. Then someone did, she said, and they passed it to him. He sat down. This was, she realized, the first time she'd seen him sit down in a way that looked undeliberate, just a man sitting because his legs were tired of holding him up. There are 3 accounts I can't trace, she said. Give me 72 hours. He looked at her. What do you need? Coffee, she said. Real coffee, not whatever Rourke makes. And access to the Cayman filing records from 2019 onward. Something happened at the corner of his mouth. The almost smile, same as before, but slightly different this time. Slightly more like the real thing. Rourke's coffee is terrible, he agreed. She found the first account in 18 hours, the second in another 12. The third took 38 hours. 4 cups of actual good coffee that Voss had, without comment, sourced from somewhere, and 1 conversation at 3 in the morning where she and Voss sat on opposite sides of the desk, and she walked him through the logic. And he asked questions that were precise and quiet, and suggested he understood more of what she was saying than almost anyone else she'd explained money to. It wasn't building, she told him finally. It was both. Halverson was stealing, and he was using the stolen money to build something, a parallel structure, a competing entity, with Colfax as the spine and 3 new front companies as the ribs, something that would eventually have looked enough like Voss's operation that it could have replaced it, or displaced it. He was going to move against you, she said. He needed your infrastructure, or something that looked like it. He built a replica. Voss sat across from her and said nothing for a very long time. How long until it would have been operational? He asked. She checked her notes. Based on the capital accumulation rate, 4 months, maybe 3 if he accelerated. He'll accelerate now, Voss said. He knows someone found Vauclain. He knows someone found it. He doesn't know who. He'll find out. Voss looked at her. He's thorough. So am I, she said. He looked at her for a moment, the same clinical, precise look as the first night in her office, but something in it had shifted, the way light shifts in a room when a cloud moves. She still couldn't read it. She was beginning to think maybe it wasn't meant to be read. You should sleep, he said. I've slept 4 hours in the last 2 days. Yes, he said. I know. You should sleep more than that. I'm fine. You have dark circles and you're holding your coffee cup with both hands, he said. You're not fine. You're running on something that isn't energy anymore. He stood up. The information will still be there in the morning. Halvorsen moves carefully. We have time. She looked at him. He was still standing by the window. He was often by the window, she'd noticed, as if he needed to see the exits, and the city behind him was doing its permanent nightlight thing, all that orange and gold against the dark. Voss, she said. Yes, why accountants? She asked. You said you don't kill accountants. But most people in your position. She stopped. You keep saying I'm valuable because of what I can do. But you could have just taken my work and left me to get arrested. He was quiet. You didn't, she said. He looked at her with an expression she finally had a name for. Not calculation, not assessment. Something older and less comfortable than either of those. Something that said, there are things I've done, and choices I've made, and I have to live with all of them. And I have chosen to live with them the way I choose to live with everything, which is by being very still and very precise and not letting the math of it catch me by surprise. No, he said. I didn't. He left. She sat in the study with the maps and the files and the hum of the city outside, and she thought about $47 million and a gun going off and a man who kept the most exact books she'd ever seen. She thought about her mother's rent envelope. She thought about the library book on double-entry bookkeeping and the 16-year-old who'd taught herself to read the grammar of money because someone she trusted had lied to her, and she'd needed to know the truth badly enough to go find it herself. She thought, the problem is larger than I thought. She thought, I'm not afraid of it. She was still thinking about that when she finally, at some point around 5 in the morning, put her head down on her folded arms at the desk and slept. When she woke up, there was a blanket over her shoulders. She didn't ask about it, but she noticed it, the same way she'd noticed the emergency Tylenol, the same way she'd noticed that Voss ended every phone call when she walked into a room, the same way she'd noticed that he always positioned himself between her and the door. Small things. The kind of things that only mean something when they add up. She was very good at things that added up. Rourke was in the kitchen, making her terrible coffee. Nell stood in the doorway for a moment and said, He put the blanket there. Rourke looked at her. Mr. Voss doesn't do things without a reason. I know, Nell said. That's what I'm thinking about. Rourke said nothing. She was, Nell thought, a woman of very sensible silences. The morning briefing was at 9. Voss arrived at 8:58. She'd noticed he was always exactly on time, never early, never late, as if punctuality were another form of control. And he sat across from her with a cup of coffee and did not ask if she'd slept well. Halvorsen has a meeting, he said. Tomorrow. The counterparty is one of the 3 companies in the new structure. How do you know? He looked at her. Right, she said. Don't ask. I need you to trace the capital flow from that meeting, where the money goes after. It'll be a transfer, probably offshore, probably within 6 hours of the meeting ending. He slid a folder across the desk. These are the accounts I know he uses. But if it's going to the new structure, it'll be different. She opened the folder. She read it. She did the thing her brain did automatically, which was begin to see the shape of the thing. Not the details yet, but the architecture, the way the transactions related to each other, the way sentences related to each other, the grammar underneath. He'll use a buffer, she said. 1 step removed. He'll move it to something clean first, then to the structure. Yes, then I need to know the buffer before the meeting, not after. She looked up. I need to know which clean accounts he has access to that aren't in this file. Voss looked at her. That's what I thought, she said. You don't know. I know most of them. Most isn't the one he'll use. He was quiet. Give me everything you have on Halverson's personal finances, she said. Not the business, the personal. Where he eats, where he vacations, what he buys. Money leaves a trail in behavior before it leaves a trail in accounts. If I know how he spends, I can predict how he hides. Something in Voss's expression shifted. She'd learned to read him in pieces, not the whole, not yet, maybe not ever, but the pieces. This piece said, I did not expect that. You've done this before, he said. I grew up watching someone hide money from me, she said. I got good at finding it. He looked at her for a long moment, with something that wasn't quite professional assessment, and wasn't quite anything else she had a clean name for. I'll get you what you need, he said. She nodded. She went back to the folder. But she felt it, the weight of his attention, staying on her for just a moment longer than necessary. The same way you feel a light that's been turned on in a room behind you. Not intrusive, just present. She did not look up. She added it to the column she was keeping, the one she hadn't named yet, the one where she filed the blanket and the Tylenol and the way he ended calls when she walked in. She was very good at knowing when numbers were pointing somewhere. She just wasn't sure yet where this particular set of numbers led.